You can own companies, drive the finest cars, and build homes big enough to get lost in, but none of it means anything when your child looks at you and says nothing. I'm Ryan Caldwell, 41, founder and CEO of a tech company valued at $3.6 billion. But before any of that, I was just a father who didn't know how to save his son. My son Ethan was born 2 months premature, fragile, small, and fierce. From day one, he was a fighter. He spoke early, walked late, but always looked at me like he knew everything would be okay. Until one day, it wasn't. After his mother left, everything changed. She said she couldn't handle my absence anymore. Said she needed someone present, not just a provider. She packed a bag, kissed Ethan on the forehead, and never looked back. I told myself I'd manage. I'd be both mom and dad. I hired the best nannies, arranged the best schooling, made sure Ethan lacked nothing except me. I saw it happen gradually. He'd say fewer words each week, stopped responding to bedtime stories, stopped laughing when I tickled him. And then, one morning, he just stopped, speaking altogether. Doctors labeled it selective mutism, likely caused by emotional trauma or stress. But no diagnosis prepared me for the pain of hearing silence where there used to be laughter. My son, my light, had gone dark. I tried everything. I threw my resources at the problem like I always had in business. Speech therapists, psychologists, experimental clinics, child specialists, nothing. Every session ended with the same polite but helpless shrug. He needs time. He needs connection. Connection. How ironic. I'd spent my life building networks, investing in systems, optimizing every process, and I couldn't connect with my own child. Weeks turned into months. Ethan would just sit by the window, hugging his stuffed bear, gazing into the distance as if waiting for someone who wasn't me. I kept working, kept pretending. That's what we high achievers do. We pour ourselves into what we can control. But inside, I was breaking. I'd close my office door and stare at the picture of Ethan smiling at 2 years old, his last recorded laugh before the silence. Then came that morning. It was a Wednesday. I had a presentation at 10 a.m. and barely 3 hours of sleep. My housekeeper called in sick. Ethan wouldn't eat his breakfast, and I, caffeine-deprived and disheveled, was running behind schedule. I decided to skip my usual espresso bar and pulled into a small roadside diner I'd never noticed before. Maple, a moonlight cafe, sounded charming, looked like it hadn't changed since the 80s. But I was desperate. Inside, it smelled like warm syrup and old books, the kind of place where regulars sipped coffee for hours and the servers knew your birthday. It was cozy, cluttered and completely opposite of my sleek, sterile life. I carried Ethan in. He clung to my blazer like he always did in public, silent and alert. I nodded at a young woman near the counter. She turned and offered a smile that wasn't forced, one of those rare smiles that made you feel seen. "Good morning. Table 4. 2? She asked. I nodded. She guided us to a corner booth and handed me 2 menus. Then she crouched slightly to Ethan's eye level and whispered, "I saved the best seat just for you." He didn't respond. He rarely did. But he looked at her. And that was something. "Can I get you both something to drink?" she asked. "Hot chocolate's magical on cold mornings." I ordered a coffee. Ethan stared at the table. She didn't press, just smiled again and walked off. She returned with the drinks, placing Ethan's cocoa in front of him with a small whipped cream heart on top. "This one's extra special," she said softly. "Only brave boys get the heart." I was about to thank her when something caught my eye. Ethan was watching her, really watching her. She turned to serve another table, humming as she moved, some old melody, almost like a lullaby. And Ethan, for the first time in months, smiled. It was small, faint, but unmistakable. My heart leapt. She returned moments later, with pancakes for a nearby table, carrying them like sacred offerings. Want to help me with the syrup? She suddenly asked Ethan. He looked up, wide-eyed. She didn't wait for permission. She placed the syrup bottle in front of him. These pancakes don't taste right unless a special kid pours the syrup. Think you can help? Ethan blinked. I expected the usual freeze, the withdrawal. But he reached out, slowly, carefully, and he poured the syrup. The woman clapped quietly. Perfect! You've got the magic touch. Ethan beamed. I was frozen, speechless. I, a man who'd negotiated million-dollar contracts and debated on live TV, had no words for what I was witnessing. After breakfast, she returned with a smile. He's got gentle eyes, she said. And a brave soul. What's his name? Ethan, I replied, my voice trembling. He hasn't spoken in 10 months. She looked at him, then back at me, stunned. I didn't know, she whispered. I'm so sorry. No, don't be, I said, swallowing emotion. You just did more in 10 minutes than professionals did in 10 months. She knelt down and placed her hand gently on the table near Ethan. Hey, Ethan. Anytime you want to come back, I'll save you the pancake magic. He stared at her, then slowly gave a tiny nod. As I helped him down from the booth, something unbelievable happened. He looked up at her and whispered one word. Bye. My knees nearly buckled. She gasped, covering her mouth. Tears welled up in her eyes. Did you hear? That? I stammered. She nodded, speechless. I took a breath. What's your name? She wiped her cheek. Emily. Emily. I paused. You might have just saved my son, she smiled faintly. Maybe he saved me too. That was the day everything changed. After that morning at Maple and Moonlight Cafe, I couldn't get Emily out of my head. Not in the romantic sense, at least not then, but in a what just happened kind of way. How did a waitress with no degree, no title, no apparent background, in therapy do something no expert could? Ethan had spoken. One word, yes. But when your world has been silent for 10 months, one word is thunder. I canceled 2 meetings that day. Sat in my office staring at a blank document, mind racing. I Googled Emily Maple and Moonlight. Nothing. No social media, no LinkedIn, no clue. It didn't matter. The next morning, I woke up early, dressed Ethan, and drove straight back to the diner. Emily wasn't there. An older woman with kind eyes greeted us. Looking for Em? She asked. I nodded. She works Thursday through Sunday mornings. You just missed her. I returned Thursday. This time I wasn't pretending it was about the food. Ethan was alert, even excited, as if he somehow knew. Emily walked out from the kitchen and froze when she saw us. Ethan, she said, beaming, you came back. He smiled. That rare, innocent smile I hadn't seen in nearly a year. She knelt by him again. More pancake magic today? He nodded. It became routine. Thursdays through Sundays, 8 a.m., corner booth. Emily would serve. Ethan would interact, quietly, but purposefully. Sometimes he'd hum when she hummed. Sometimes he'd try to whisper a word. She never pushed, never questioned. She invited. One morning, I finally asked her, Emily, how do you know what to do with him? She wiped her hands with a towel and sat briefly on the edge of our booth. You probably won't believe me, she said, but I used to be just like him. You, she nodded, didn't speak until I was 7. Teachers thought I was slow. Doctors said I had emotional regression. Truth was, I just felt safer in silence. What changed? I asked. She smiled, remembering. My grandmother. She raised me. Never forced me to speak, just filled the silence with music, kindness, and patience. One day, I sang before I spoke. It started there. I looked at Ethan, who was quietly tracing syrup circles on his plate. So, you think music helps him? I don't think, she replied. I know. That night, I brought home an old record player I hadn't touched in years. Jazz, lullabies, classical scores. Ethan didn't react much at first. But every time Emily introduced a new melody at the cafe, he'd light up. It clicked. She wasn't just reaching him emotionally, she was communicating in a language he understood. One no therapist had ever tried. By week 4, Ethan whispered, 4 words, more, please, pancake, and Emily. Each time I cried. That weekend, I invited her for lunch at my estate. She hesitated. I'm just a waitress, Mr. Caldwell. I smiled. You're the only person in this city Ethan wants to speak to. That makes you more important than any consultant I've ever paid. She showed up wearing jeans, sneakers, and a nervous smile. Ethan ran to her. Literally ran. We sat in the garden. I served her tea on $2,000 china, feeling ridiculous. She looked around and said, "It's beautiful, but it also looks a little lonely." I didn't respond. She added, "I don't mean that in a bad way. Just empty houses feel different than lived-in homes." I glanced at Ethan. He was humming to himself on the swing. She was right. I built this place to impress people, I admitted. Not to raise a child. She smiled gently. Well, now you can do both. Impress him, raise him, heal with him. It was the most profound advice I'd gotten in years, and it came from someone who worked for tips. Months passed. Ethan's vocabulary expanded. He wasn't suddenly a chatterbox, but the walls he'd built inside started cracking. Every week, he opened a little more. With me, with Emily, with the world. I tried to pay her. She refused. "Don't turn this into a job," she said. "He's not a client. He's a little boy who needs love, not payroll." That humbled me. So I did something different. I invited her to co-create a program with me. Something for kids like Ethan, not just therapy, but emotional communication through music, rhythm, and empathy. I offered her a co-founder title and 49% of the project. She laughed. "You're kidding." "I'm not," I said. "I can fund it. You can lead it. You've got the magic." She cried then. Not a small sniffle. A full release. Years of being overlooked, underestimated, underpaid, undone in one invitation. "You don't even know me," she said through tears. "But Ethan does," I replied. "And that's all I need to know." We named it Echo Speak, a program for selectively mute children to rediscover their voices through connection and creativity. Emily ran the curriculum. I built the infrastructure. Our first pilot helped 7 kids speak for the first time. Emily once told me, "Silence isn't a void, it's a language. You just have to listen." Because of her, I finally heard my son. When we launched Echo Speak, I had no idea what we were stepping into. I've founded startups, negotiated high-stakes mergers, and led global expansions, but nothing prepared me for what it meant to build something that heals, not sells, not scales. Heals. Emily and I began small. 1 borrowed community center room, 7 children, 2 donated keyboards, 1 guitar. No therapists, no suits, just Emily, a few volunteers, and a lot of courage. She insisted we make it feel more like a playground than a program. "Children open up when they feel safe, not studied," she said. And somehow her instincts were always right. The first sessions were quiet. Kids sat curled into corners, hiding behind stuffed toys or drawing invisible lines in the air. I remember watching one little girl named Zoe, who hadn't spoken in over a year, just sit and sway as Emily hummed a lullaby. She didn't say anything, but she stopped shaking. That was the start. Emily was never rushed, never loud, never intrusive. She just invited them in. Music first, then play, then storytelling, then voice. She had this one exercise she called whisper trees. The children would sit in a circle and whisper one word into a paper leaf. Then they'd hang it on a branch in the middle of the room. At the end of every session, the tree would be full of paper leaves with secret words. Safe. Blue. Mom. Help. Want. Magic. It wasn't a miracle. It was a process. But it worked. Each week, More parents showed up. More stories of silence turning into sound. And through it all, Ethan was thriving. I can still remember the first time he ran up to me after a session and shouted, "Daddy, I made a friend!" That sentence hit me harder than any keynote speech or stock spike ever had. One afternoon, as we packed up from a session, I caught Emily standing alone in the corner of the room, staring at the whisper tree. Her eyes were glassy. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded. "Just didn't know I'd get to be part of something like this." I smiled. "You are this." She looked at me and whispered, "Sometimes I feel like a waitress pretending to be a miracle worker." I walked up, pulled a leaf from the tree, and handed it to her. "This one says Emily. That's all the proof I need." She laughed, then teared up again. "You ever feel like life gave you a second chance without telling you why?" "All the time," I said. "His name is Ethan." As the program expanded, word spread quickly. News outlets caught on. A local magazine ran a feature on us. A tech conference asked me to speak, but this time, not about investments or innovation. They wanted to hear about fatherhood. That was new for me. I walked up to that stage, suit and all, but this time, no charts, no slides. Just a photo of Ethan smiling, one taken just last month, mid-laugh, ice cream on his nose. I spoke about silence, about absence, about realizing too late that presence isn't something you buy, it's something you earn. And then I told them about Emily, how a part-time waitress walked into our lives and rewrote everything. When I finished, there was a standing ovation, but it wasn't for me. It was for the truth. Back home, Emily was the same. Even after we received offers from 3 investors and 1 educational publisher to license EchoSpeak, she stayed grounded. "This has to stay human," she told me. "We can grow, but not if we forget why we started." I'd never admired anyone more. One evening after a long session, I offered to drive her home. We hadn't spoken much about her personal life, and she rarely volunteered it. She hesitated, then nodded. We pulled up outside a tiny walk-up apartment. Modest, old, probably the same place she'd lived for years. As she gathered her things, I asked gently, "Emily, what do you want? I mean, really want?" She paused. "I want to matter," she whispered. "Not just in this program. I want to believe that who I am is enough." That's when I realized she didn't even know. Didn't know she'd become the most influential person in my son's life. Didn't realize she was the reason he found his voice. "You changed my life," I told her. She looked stunned. "No, I didn't." I leaned in. "Yes, you did. You changed his life too. And I think you need to stop seeing yourself as just the waitress who got lucky." She was quiet. Then she said something that stayed with me forever. I was waiting for someone to believe in me the way I believed in them. Later that night, I stood outside her building, watching the light from her apartment window fade. And I knew, not just about Ethan, not just about EchoSpeak. I knew she was the missing piece, not because of some fairy tale romance, but because she reminded me, again and again, that real wealth isn't in what we accumulate. It's in who we lift. In the months that followed, we opened 3 more EchoSpeak centers across the state. Hundreds of children enrolled. A waiting list formed. Parents who once feared they'd never hear their child's voice again were now watching them perform in whisper tree showcases. One of the most powerful moments came when a boy named Levi stood on stage. Holding a microphone with trembling hands, he looked out at the audience, found his mother's eyes, and said, "I'm not scared anymore." The room erupted. His mom collapsed into tears. Emily held her tightly. I realized then, we hadn't built a therapy center. We'd built a family. A year after that first whisper in a pancake booth, the silence that once haunted our home had become something sacred. A memory, not a prison. Ethan now spoke in full sentences. He still had quiet days, moments of retreat, but he laughed freely. He asked questions. He called me Dad like it was a badge of honor, not a whisper of uncertainty. Every time he said Emily's name, it carried a spark. not dependency. Gratitude, EchoSpeak, had expanded to 5 cities. We were being asked to replicate the model nationally. Major investors came knocking, ready to pour millions into the mission. For once in my career, I wasn't focused on the money. I wanted the right partners, not the richest ones. But through all the meetings, stages, and headlines, Emily stayed the same. Still humble. Still showing up early and leaving late. Still hugging each child like they were her own. One day we received an invitation from the state governor. He was hosting a gala honoring educators and changemakers. Emily didn't want to go. "I don't belong in a room like that," she said. "You belong at the center of it," I replied. Reluctantly, she agreed. That night, she wore a simple navy dress. No makeup, just a nervous smile. The moment she stepped out of the car, cameras turned. But she didn't pose. She looked for Ethan, took his hand, and asked him if he was okay. It was poetic, being honored for changing hundreds of lives, yet still being anchored by one small boy who started it all. On stage, the governor handed her the award and said, "Sometimes angels come disguised in aprons, not halos." The room erupted. Emily stood there, frozen. Then she turned to me and whispered, "This is real?" I nodded. All of it. After the gala, we stood under the night sky on the mansion's balcony. She leaned on the railing, wind brushing through, her hair. "You know," she said, "I never imagined a life like this. I used to pray I'd make it through the next rent cycle. Now, this." She turned to me. "I don't even know what to do with it." I looked at her for a long time. Not as a business partner. Not as the woman who saved my son. Just her. "Then let me show you," I said. "Let me build a world where you never doubt your worth again." She blinked, confused. "What are you saying?" I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a folded blueprint. She opened it. At the top, in bold letters, it read, "Emily Rhodes Center for Transformative Communication, Breaking Silence with Love." Her hand covered her mouth. "You're naming it after me?" I nodded. "Because it started with you." She tried to speak, but no words came. "I bought the land last week," I continued. "We're building the flagship campus in Ethan's name. But your name will be on the front wall, so that every parent, every child who walks through those doors knows who gave them hope." She wept, tears that had waited years to be seen. "You really believe in me that much," she whispered. "I did from the first time you made my son speak." I said, "I just needed time to catch up to your heart." Months passed. Construction began. The center took shape faster than any project I'd ever funded, not because of speed, but purpose. Emily designed the curriculum rooms herself. One space was filled with hanging lights and walls children could draw on. Another had music stations, echo domes, whisper tunnels. Her vision was unlike anything I'd seen in education. We hired from the heart, not resumes. Former artists, caretakers, retired teachers, people who knew how to listen, not just instruct. When the center opened, the ribbon was cut by Ethan. He stood in front of the sign that read the Emily Rhodes Center and said clearly, "This place helped me find my words." After the ceremony, as guests left and lights dimmed, Emily and I sat on a bench inside the garden she designed for the children. "You did it," I said. She looked at me. "We did." Silence settled between us, but this time it was peaceful. "Then," she asked, almost shyly, "why did you really name it after me?" I smiled. "Because when the world went quiet, you didn't walk away. You sat in the silence with us. And from it, you gave us music, meaning, and a way out." She rested, her head on my shoulder. "I never told you this, but I once thought my life would always be small, invisible." "You're not invisible anymore," I whispered. She turned to me, eyes filled with something deeper than gratitude. "I don't think I've ever loved someone before now," she said. I held her hand. "Then we're both learning how to speak. Again. 1 year later, we celebrated the center's first anniversary with a showcase. Children performed songs, recited poems, and shared stories. Parents clapped through tears. One boy who hadn't spoken in years gave a speech. His mother collapsed into his arms. Emily stood beside me, watching it all. "I used to think I didn't have a voice," she said, "but now I hear it in every child who finds theirs." I nodded. "You gave them more than sound. You gave them identity." Today, Echo Speak is in 12 states, thousands of families served. Ethan is 10 now, confident, curious, and compassionate. He says he wants to be a helper like Emily. I smile every time I've built empires, traded companies, sat in boardrooms with the most powerful people alive, but nothing compares to the day a young woman in a diner taught my son to say pancake, or the moment I realized that the greatest wealth isn't found in profit margins or private jets. It's found in a child's first word, a woman's quiet strength, and a life lived lifting others. And sometimes all it takes is someone who refuses to walk away when the silence feels too heavy.